A couple of weeks ago, I covered a My Little Pony fanfiction or grimdark revolving around Twilight Sparkle getting trapped inside a time loop. This story was hopeless, sad, and dreadful, yet it was only a small dip into the ocean of these disturbing My Little Pony grimdarks. Which brings us to today's video. It seemed that many of you loved my video on Diary of a Time Looper, so I decided to follow that one up with a coverage of another MLP grimdark. A popular one that a few commenters brought up is titled Blink. This one was released on August 12 of 2016 by a fanfiction user going by Ocalhoon. Before we continue on with the story, let's read the small description given to it. Teleportation. It is the best possible way to travel, as long as you don't think about it too much. As long as you don't ask where Twilight goes in that split second when she's neither here nor there. The story begins with Twilight writing "Grab her now" with blood onto the wall. She reiterates by saying it's not her blood, but it kind of is. Twilight then says this in the next line. Teleportation is just a flash, I once thought. Papoof and you're there. I should be able to forgive myself for thinking that, but I can't. I can't forgive any of myselves for being so fundamentally wrong. We learn that Twilight feels like she's been in this weird place for about 3 days, though time flows very differently here. So how exactly did she end up there? Well, Twilight wanted to get to Pinkie Pie's place a bit faster, as she took too long to pick out her dress. In Twilight's words, teleportation is a complicated spell. Few master it. I wish fewer did. I wish it was never developed. Despite the spell's complexity, I was accustomed to it. I used it flippantly. When Twilight teleported, a perfect copy of her was made completely out of nothing, to which that copy ended up vanishing. The Twilight were following around then fell into a huge pile of pony corpses. But they weren't just any ponies. They were all different versions of her. This made Twilight sick, because why wouldn't it? As she recovers, we learn that one of the other Twilights was still alive, just driven to madness. Twilight begins to describe her. She was thin, gaunt, had frayed hair, and had dark stains around her mouth. She'd even make weapons out of old bones. Twilight spares us the details, but we can easily infer that our Twilight had to kill the crazy Twilight. After all that, Twilight begins to have a bit of a monologue. She goes on about how cruel the process of teleportation is, and the fact that all these clones have pretty much been disregarded as trash. She then begins to bring up how there were younger skeletons in the heap. That then leads to Twilight talking about how she loved practicing teleportations when she was younger. Just thinking about the lonely deaths the young Twilights had to face just added to her turmoil. What made things even worse is that it wasn't even just Twilights in the pile. No, there were Spikes, as well as Twilight's friends. As Twilight points out, many of the corpses were all starved and dehydrated. Adding on to that, they had brown stains in their muzzles and bites taken out of them. A bit of conflict builds in Twilight's mind. Will she stoop to cannibalism for the sake of survival? Twilight decides to focus on moving around the bodies. It's noted that she has to do it by hoof because her magic isn't working. We're back at the beginning, where Twilight is writing, "Grab her now." She does this in order to save the next clone Twilight. Perhaps the next Twilight that teleports could grab onto a fresh copy, so that she could prevent themselves from being trapped in this dimension, while still cooperating with the new copy. She could perhaps even help our Twilight escape. Towards the end, Twilight stays hopeful. At the same time, she's hoping that she won't succumb to the cannibalistic cravings the previous Twilights had. Our story ends with these words. Please, I plead to my other self. Please just never teleport again. I think as someone who's been consuming My Little Pony horror content since they were a little kid, this felt refreshing. I first want to say I'm a bit fatigued with the current state of internet horror regarding both MLP and outside of it. Whenever I think of MLP horror, it's either what if so-and-so pony was a psychopath, or those corny-ass infection AUs. Even tropes involving the uncanny valley, or some cosmic entity, were things I initially thought were cool, are now just things I think are played out. Both Time Looper and Blink followed neither of these tropes, hence why I enjoyed both so much. To repeat a point I made with Time Looper, this story is short, so it takes advantage of that to strike a more meaningful punch, while leaving little room for flaws. There is no main villain of the story. Almost everything is within the mental anguish of Twilight and the constant battle with her mind. The minute hope of escaping, the thought of seeing versions of herself rot away, the consequences of teleportation, and the eventual need for cannibalism. The author adds in pieces to not only paint a picture into your head, but to really emphasize how horrible this scenario is. Things like the small segment about the baby Twilight corpses, and the fact that the corpses were either starved up or had chunks eaten out of them. It's neat we have an approach to the Star Trek teleporter paradox. If you don't know what that is, it's basically when teleportation involves killing someone and cloning them. So the question of, are they really the same person, pops up. For this story, the answer is, nah. I think to make matters worse for Twilight, but better for the story, the ending is just bleak. Twilight is trying out a strategy where the main priority isn't even to save herself, but to prevent the next Twilight from facing the same fate. She doesn't even know if it'll work. I'm sure you guys have questions like, what about the first Twilight, or any of the other Twilights? After all, that ending is open-ended, and you probably want to know what happens next. Many fans of this story have made their own additions to what I call the Blinkverse. Prequels, sequels, spin-offs, and the like. And the thing is, they're all recognized by the original author, and they even organized them into a group, meaning they're canon to some extent. Now I won't go into much detail with these, as I did with the original story, but I think they're very much worth talking about. Not the first is a prequel to Blink that's a much longer story focusing on a previous Twilight. With it being longer, the story has more added plot points. These include Twilight resorting to cannibalism and using the bones as toys, them interacting with other characters that fell into the void, and Twilight going mad to the point of hearing voices. To Blink is another prequel, this time focusing on the original Twilight who learned to teleport from Celestia just to fall into the void. They thought they did everything wrong, only until more Twilight started appearing. I think this concept is cool, except for the fact that they use magic in the void in this one. This is contradictory, because we know from the original story they can't use magic. The first sequel to focus on is titled Blinking. And here, not only are we focusing on another Twilight, but we also learn that the grab her method just doesn't work. Though I should mention they use magic in this version of the void too. Plus, this Twilight tries saving another Twilight and it ends miserably. Funnily enough, this fan-made sequel has its own fan-made sequels, with a fan-made sequel being made of one of those. The second sequel on the list is titled Rapid Blink. Here, we also get a civilization of sorts in the void, and it's a lot more hopeful here, as they're able to send a report to the current Twilight, warning them of the dangers of teleportation. As for the third sequel, we have Post Blink. This one focuses on the Twilight from the main story escaping and just dealing with the trauma she experienced. Finally, we have a spin-off / sequel titled Flash, and here we get yet another Twilight who sees the writing on the wall and attempts the method to escape, but still ends up trapped in the void. However, this Twilight is much more of a scout compared to the previous Twilights. She has sandwiches prepped in her bag, plus she interacts with the other characters here and does some outdoor boys level survival tactics. I didn't want to go too much into detail on these fan works, mainly because they all vary in length and quality, plus, despite their major differences, they all follow the same premise of Twilight teleporting and ending up in the void. It really is intriguing how a fan work got praised to the point there's an expanded universe on it now. That's pretty much all I have for you guys today. Comment down your thoughts or any topics I should cover, and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Take care of yourselves, and of course, as usual, please have yourselves a damn good one. Also, go stream a Terminally Online Christmas. Hopefully this video is out before Christmas, but go stream it anyways.
I'm 6 days after Christmas. I'm not sure if that's a necessary intro, but it was the night before Christmas when all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. Then Casey Valentine said, "Fuck it, let's start a Christmas album."